Welcome to part 2 of the update 3.2 new weapons and upgrades. In this video we'll cover Niles, Tharja, Eliwood, and Nino. If you missed part 1, check the description or you can find a link at the end card. Let's get started. First we have Niles and his own unique bow. Niles' bow is a 14-man weapon and an accelerate special trigger, aka it's like a killer or slaying bow. Like all bows, it's effective against flying foes, and it has one other effect. If the foe's defense is equal to or greater than the foe's resistance plus 5, then deal 7 damage. In simpler terms, if the enemy's defense is 5 points higher than their res stat, they take 7 true damage every time Niles attacks. This is the same effect as the Shining Bow, which is currently only found on Nino, and she is Niles' daughter, so that's a neat little thing. So I would say that Niles definitely got one of the cooler new weapons. A Slaying Bow and Shining Bow combined is pretty awesome, and it makes up for some of his shortcomings. Mainly, you'll want to take note of his abysmal 25 base attack stat, which is not great. Shining Bow gives Niles some much needed extra damage against tankier enemies, and by keeping the -1 special cooldown effect from his Killer Bow, he can get some faster special procs as well. The special upgrade really complements this part of his weapon. If you spend 200 Divine Dew on this bow, Niles gets Flashing Blade 3. If his speed is higher than his opponent's, grants special cooldown charge +1 for each of his attacks. Man, this is really good, and this bow would be incredibly powerful on an archer with higher base attack. If you've been playing this game since launch, you probably know how Niles works. His original kit came with a Killer Bow and Iceberg. Iceberg becomes a 2 cooldown special. If Niles gets to double, which he could do pretty often in the early days of the game, then he would end up proccing Iceberg if fighting someone who hit him back. The amount of times I have lost units to this exact scenario is kind of sad, and even though Niles has an awful base attack stat, the damage from Iceberg made a big difference. Now with the potential for 7 extra damage on every attack, I think Niles has himself a really good weapon. You don't need the special upgrade, but I think it's amazing for some build options. First up, you have to decide whether you want to run Iceberg or Glacies. Both are viable, but they work best in different situations. Iceberg is hands down the best option if you're going for offensive desperation builds. Because Niles' bow still has the permanent -1 cooldown reduction, Iceberg becomes a 2-turn special. With the special upgrade, if Niles procs Desperation, he should also proc Flashing Blade, and that means his first shot takes off 2 cooldown. That charges up Iceberg and primes it for his second shot, and depending on how much resistance your Niles has, that's an extra 17 or more damage. For Glacies, it becomes a 3-turn special, and this means it can proc in 1 round of combat when Niles doubles and the enemy can counterattack. This is assuming Flashing Blade is also active. His first attack brings the cooldown to 1, the enemy attack brings him to 0, and then Niles can unleash it on his second go around. If you want a more scrappy Niles build, then you might actually want Glacies instead. Now I'm a big fan of Fury plus Desperation, and in recent times I've been combining it with Brazen Attack and Resistance. I run this on my Innis, and it's definitely one of my recent favorite setups. Niles takes things to a whole nother level. As we mentioned, with the Flashing Blade upgrade and Desperation, Niles can proc Iceberg on his second attack. However, by adding Brazen Attack and Res to the mix, he gets an additional 7 attack, which he really wants, and another 7 resistance, which boosts Iceberg's damage even more. This doesn't even account for the potential 7 true damage from the Shining Bow effect, and while Niles has low base attack to start with, he can make some huge improvements. This is a really simple setup, and I think it complements Niles' bow very well. Now for something a bit different, you can try out Mystic Boost. This allows Niles to fight dragons again, which he does have the res to do so, and he gets an extra 6 HP after every fight. This type of setup might be on where you want Glacies over Iceberg. If you want to play slightly more defensive, bond skills like Attack and Res Bond or Attack and Speed Bond are great pairings for Niles. If you can raise his speed high enough, he won't need Quick Riposte to double and get those Glacie procs. I would also entertain the idea of Close Counter with this type of build, but I think it's a bit questionable with Niles' low defense stat. If you can make it work, it would allow him to tank melee dragon hits and then counterattack back. I think Niles definitely got a good weapon and upgrade. What puts most people off is his low base attack, but this bow does its best to remedy that weakness, and I think it's a great option. It can work for offense or defense too, which adds some build variety depending on what direction you want to take Niles in. If you enjoy the character, I think it's at least worth checking out. Next up we have Tharja, who got a new tome called Tharja's Hex. Tharja's Hex adds total bonuses on unit 2 damage dealt, aka it's still a blade tome. However, it's an upgrade because it gets rid of the special cooldown penalty and has 1 extra might as well. If you already use Tharja with a blade tome, you can literally pick up Tharja's Hex for I think 400 SP and call it a day. The 1 extra might is appreciated, but the no special cooldown penalty does change some things for your builds. We'll get to that in a moment, but we should talk about the special upgrade because it has a pretty unique effect that I don't think we've seen yet. Picking it up allows Tharja to inflict -4 attack and speed on foes within 2 spaces during combat. Now, we've seen weapons that inflict in combat debuffs like Julius's Lopter or Young Azura's Book of Shadows. However, this effect is different. It reads like a reverse drive skill that debuffs enemies rather than buffs allies. Because it works on all enemies, it means Tharja herself can benefit from those debuffs, and if you position correctly, her allies can get in on the effects as well. It may not be the easiest to set up for Tharja's allies, but she herself will always benefit from those effects. The -4 speed is huge because that allows Tharja to double more often, which is great when you have a Blade Tome adding ridiculous amounts of bonus attack. The -4 tag is also great, making Tharja tankier, and even though her defense and res are somewhat below average, she has a good amount of HP to make up for it. It has a really cool animation as well, and I'd have to say this is an incredible pick if you use Blade Tome Tharja. Now for Tharja, she has a few build options that she can share with Nino, who also got a Blade Tome weapon, and as such, if you want more ideas, I'll be discussing another setup later on. First up, I have to mention the good old Fury and Desperation setup, which is one of the standards for Blade Tome mages. It already worked well because the Blade Tome is getting you so much extra attack that 2 back-to-back hits is usually enough to finish off most targets. However, without the special cooldown penalty, Tharja and Nino get some interesting new choices. If you give them Flashing or Heavy Blade, then they can run 2-turn specials and proc them on the second hit of Desperation, in the exact same fashion as we talked about for Niles, except we can use only Glimmer or Moonbow. While both of these were already popular choices because of the cooldown penalty, they get even better when used with Desperation builds. Now, some other fun specials include any 4-turn specials like Dragon Fang or Astra. Since they are no longer affected by the penalty, it's easier to charge them up with Flashing or Heavy Blade, and it only takes 2 hits to get them ready. Now, if you want to try close counter build, I do think Tharja can pull it off, but you really need some high investment. The special upgrade is helpful because of the -4 attack it inflicts on her enemies, but Tharja will still want extra defensive stats, whether it's through merges, summoner support, or even the new Dragon Flowers. The -4 speed debuff also helps her keep up her doubles without needing a stat boosting A skill. While I wouldn't say Tharja's Hex is made for close counter, it does help if you want to run it. For these builds, Vantage is a great option because Blade Tomes get so much single hit damage, and you can run something like Attack and Defense Bond for even more attack to make sure Tharja one-shots her enemies during Vantage. Here is an example build for a highly invested Tharja with close counter from Reddit user Wander1POS. Hope you don't mind me showing this off, but it's a very scary Tharja, and it's an example of what kind of stats she can reach with just close counter and a ton of investment. With Tharja's Hex, there is not going to be many things that can outspeed her naturally, and her HP and defenses can at least take a solid hit. Just keep Tharja buffed up and she can use Vantage to clean up the rest of the team. I would say Tharja also got a great weapon and upgrade. If you don't have the Divine Dew, she's perfectly happy with just her new base weapon, but I do think the special reverse drive upgrade is worth the do. 2019 is a great year for Eliwood, with him getting a Choose Your Legend spot, and now he gets a refinement for Durando. Durando is Eliwood's current weapon, so if you want to get any of these new effects, you will need to spend Divine Dew. Durando's new base effect is that if Eliwood initiates, he gets +6 attack during combat. Now this is just a minor upgrade, getting the full Death Blow 3 treatment instead of only the +4 extra attack. If you pick up the special refinement, Durando gets, if unit initiates combat, grants +4 attack and speed during combat. Okay, so not really original, but hey, that's a lot of stats. This effect is basically Swift Sparrow 2, and in total, this means Eliwood gets +10 attack and +4 speed on initiations. His base 31 attack and 30 speed is okay, but not super crazy, so he does appreciate those stat increases. Nothing really changes with Eliwood's playstyle, and he will continue to be a primarily player phase unit. Something interesting to note is that a 5-star plus attack Eliwood can reach 60 attack on initiations, and that's without any A skills, sacred seals, or buffs. It's pretty wild. Eliwood will have some pretty straightforward builds. With a weapon that grants +10 attack and +4 speed on initiations, it only makes sense to continue stacking both values, and you have the option of picking from A skills like Death Blow, Swift Sparrow, or Darting Blow. Now, just as a sneak peek for the upcoming Tempest trials, it has been data mined that we are getting a Darting Blow Sacred Seal, which is actually very good for the new Durando. With only upgraded Durando and the Darting Blow Seal, Eliwood would get +10 attack and speed on initiations. Add the Death Blow A skill and that's 16 attack with 10 speed. If you want more speed, use Swift Sparrow instead to get +14 attack and +14 speed. Remember that Eliwood isn't that fast naturally, so if you want him to double often, he will need some extra speed. If you want some utility over straight damage, then Heavy Blade will be an excellent skill, and you can run it in the A slot or Sacred Seal slot. Eliwood would be able to run Gale Force with this skill and proc it in one round of combat if he doubles another melee enemy. Desperation is a nice skill for when Gale Force activates, since Eliwood will probably take enough damage to be in its range. Since the back-to-back follow-ups require speed, you may want speed buffs like Hone Cavalry to make up for the Heavy Blade taking up an A slot. Now if you're a fan of debuffs, then Eliwood can run a Ploy set since his 32 base resistance is pretty decent. In a similar fashion to Est, Eliwood can offer ploys like Speed Ploy or Defense Ploy to both aid himself and his team. He can run Fury 3 to get more resistance, and he definitely wants 3 more attack, speed, and defense too. With his low defense, Eliwood will probably drop into low HP if he fights a beefy melee enemy, and that's fine if you want to run Vantage or Desperation. While Durando is just a player phase weapon, running 1 or 2 ploys can be an ace alternative if you like. It will also separate Eliwood from Sigbert, who will draw very close similarities. While Eliwood didn't get a major shift in playstyle, it's hard to argue with the simplicity of 10 extra attack and 4 extra speed. The final unit we have to discuss is little old Nino. In my opinion, one of the best launched units till this day. Nino is only going to get better, and if you're a newer player, I would still suggest building up one if you're looking for a good mage. Her new tome is called Iris's Tome, and just like Tharja's Hex, it's an upgraded blade tome with 1 more might and gets rid of the special cooldown penalty. In the same vein as Tharja, if you don't have a ton of Divine Dew, I would say Nino is very happy just with the base version of this tome. However, if you do want the special upgrade, then it has the same effects as Even Attack Wave 3. At the start of even number turns, grants +6 attack to the unit and adjacent allies for 1 turn. This bonus is granted even if no allies are adjacent. Now this is a fine upgrade. Blade tomes need field buffs to get extra attack, and attack buffs are the most important because they essentially have double the value. A +6 attack field buff will add another +6 attack because of the blade tome, and we're already up to +12 with 1 buff. Wave buffs only work every other turn, which may lack the consistency a blade tome unit wants. However, Nino can start the turn all by herself and she gets 12 extra attack. That's pretty darn good. She can also buff up her allies too, which is great since she can have other wave skills available. If you run odd attack wave in the C slot, this would guarantee Nino gets at least +6 attack every turn. The reason I would say it's not necessary to get the special upgrade is because if you're already running a blade tome, you probably already had a method for buffing them up, and if you were getting Nino to +6 attack just fine before, then even attack wave isn't going to change much. Unlike Tharja's Hex, which has a constant effect on her in matchups, Nino doesn't really require having her own attack buffs. It's very nice to have, and if you love using Nino, then it's not really a downside. I think Iris's Tome is fine in its base version, so if you don't have extra Divine Dew, I wouldn't really worry about it. For builds, Nino has the unique opportunity to run triple wave skills, and she is lucky enough to run triple even wave skills. Because we got even defense wave as a secret, so she can take something like even speed wave and get +6 to 3 stats every other turn. That's pretty ridiculous, and Nino will be self-sufficient. The only downside is that lack of consistency, which I do find important for the more intense battles. If you want to do this, Nino will do just fine with the usual Fury and Desperation combo. Also, reiterating that you can run odd attack wave instead to always get +6 attack buffs, which may work better for you. Now, something that Tharja can also join in on is being able to effectively use Special Spiral. This skill is pretty dirty because now you can always recharge 2-turn specials like Glimmer, which work really well with the insanely high damage of a blade tome. You lose Desperation but gain one-shot potential, and it can be just a lot of fun. Special Spiral also utilizes 4-turn AoE specials too. Blade tomes don't add their extra attack to the AoE special proc. That would be really broken if it did. Either way, after the special activates, the enemy then has to take the full brunt of a buffed up blade tome attack, and if they use heavy or flashing blade, that finishing blow will lower the cooldown so that the special spiral will recharge it instantly. Just by losing the special cooldown penalty, Nino and Tharja can now have a lot of fun with heavy or flashing blade, and special spiral too. The two of them got straight upgrades, with Tharja getting a slightly more interesting refine in my opinion. If you don't have Divine Dew, just give both of them their new weapons for just 400 SP, and you can start having fun. That concludes our 8 new weapon refines, and if you missed part 1, I'll have links in the description or at the end of this video. We got tons of fun new weapons and upgrades, and let me know what you think about the ones we covered in this video. Thanks for watching, I'll see you guys in the next one.